I get to introduce Dr. James Perry. Dr. Perry is a retired physician. He's been a student of the Urantia book since 1977, and he continues to lead a twice monthly study group in his home, having done so since 1982. Dr. Perry served as the first ever vice president of the Urantia Association of the United States. He's held various memberships in the Virginia Carolina Readers Local Association, including serving as president and vice president. He continues to serve as the membership chair of VCR. He's delivered over 45 presentations, including plenary presentations at local and international conferences. He's published articles in various Urantia-related journals and newsletters, and he's written over 1,000 personal papers about his spiritual journey thus far, most of which can be accessed at inspirationalmessagesoflight.com. I'll put that website in the chat here in a moment. Dr. Perry believes that the Urantia book is a divine revelation. He resides in Raleigh, North Carolina with his wife of 54 years, Marion Perry, who's also a longtime student of the Revelation. Dr. Perry, the room is yours.
Okay. What I like to do before I get started, I always like to say a little nice prayer to ask for guidance and direction. So just bear with me for a moment. I want to say a little prayer. Heavenly Father, once more we have the privilege of gathering here to share our understandings of your truth, your beauty, and your goodness, and your love. We pray, Father, that you will open our hearts and our minds so that we might receive the true meaning of what I have to offer today. In your Son's name I pray. Amen. What I'd like to do this evening, the time we have, I want to kind of give a somewhat personal journey of my understanding of faith, peace, and joy. And I'll do it that way. Can I have the first slide, Sherry? I think before we start, we need to understand that there's a difference between material and spiritual values. We're going to be talking about spiritual values for the most part, but there is a difference in material values. I think what I'd like to share with you, starting out with, I was about 12 years old when I first had my first encounter with religion, religious conversion. During this time, they had what they call going to the morning bench, where you sat on the bench and people prayed over you until you had some kind of religious experience that you would then get up and confess Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. Well, I did that, and it was a very joyous occasion, but I soon discovered that it was not lasting, that was sort of like an emotional response to something that happened spiritually. And as time went on, I discovered that all these things that I've been taught, most of them were not really true, and that there was a big difference between the spirituality and the material emotional response. So the things went pretty well, or not well, but ordinarily, until a couple of years later when my mother died. And I began to realize then that I really didn't understand what I had been led to confess. And so from that point on, for many, many years, I kind of more or less ignored God. I couldn't see any relevance of what they were being taught to my life that I was living. And as I continued in this life, the psychic agitation became worse, greater and greater, to the point where it just became overwhelming. And I realized one day that I was truly lost. It was about that time that I came across the Urantia book, and I was just interested in reading it. I didn't really pay any attention to the spiritual aspects of it, but I started reading it and began to realize that there was a section in the book called The Life of Jesus, which I began to read, and I began to read it intellectually first, and basically trying to supplement the knowledge that I had been taught about the Bible and the religion, and began to realize there was a vast difference between what I had been taught and what the reality was. And so I began this journey to understand and to find God, and to discard the childlike understanding that I had about him and my relationship with him. so that they began a long journey of trying to find what the truth is and how to live it. Next slide, Sherry. It should be apparent to most of us, I'm sure to all of us, that when we join this search for God, that the values of the relationship was not mature. They did not appear in full strength initially. It took a period of time to really appreciate the values. In this case, we're talking about faith, uh, peace, and joy. It takes time to appreciate that. In an analogous way, it's very similar to the journey that a child makes from a childhood of infancy to adulthood, where they go through all these different stages. And at some point in time, they become mature in their understanding of what life is all about. It also can be considered analogous to, next slide, Sherry, to the seven cycle circles, which has similar things undergoes in the soul of the person where they start out in the seventh circle and move towards the first circle. And in the process of doing this, they gain the supreme appreciation of spiritual values, indicating that they've reached the level of association with the material mind. Okay. The growth of faith, peace, and joy. I like to think of life experience as a vehicle that carries us down the highway of life, that where we interact with various scenarios, and we get a chance to express our attitude, to make decisions as we move along life. Some of these decisions are pleasant, some of them are unpleasant, some of them are just ordinary. We're just sort of like a routine uh, basis that we just go through them in life. But in the process, we react to these situations, and how we react to these situations determines what our spiritual response is and what spirituality we derive from them. So it's a good experience. It's a constant process. We can't live without making decisions. We make decisions all the time, and especially moral and spiritual decisions. We have to make a choice of making those. So I want to underscore that it's the growth of faith, peace, and joy, and the appreciation of those values. It's a constant process that goes on from life to death, and even beyond death. When we hit the magic worlds, we still continue this process of growth. I'll repeat this slide here. The growth of faith, peace, and joy through life experiences. I often consider experience as a vehicle that carries us down the highway of life, where we get a chance to interact with various scenarios of life, where we get a chance to choose, uh, make decisions of how we're going to respond to these things, and how we respond to these situations in life determine what our growth rate is, or how we grow at all, depending on which choice we make. Okay. All right, Sherry, next one. Faith, peace, and joy manifest differently in our outer and inner lives. It's a very true thing there. Our inner life is primarily an experience of faith and resulting of peace and joy. And how does it manifest itself in our inner life? And then we'll talk about how it manifests in our outer life, our outer life. And if there's some obscurity or seem like some confusion, don't be upset, because these things are not all the way altogether clear for me. So any obscurity results from my lack of complete appreciation of these things. But I'm trying to share with you my progress that I've made and my understanding that I've made along the way. Faith is the primary value. Out again. Faith is the primary value that the Father gives us, that allows us to know Him and to have a relationship with Him. Faith is the value that converts potentials into actualities, so that the creation of our soul is happens because we do have the potential to have a soul. And this faith launches us on the relationship with the Heavenly Father. Faith is the essence of the spiritual life. And there's a quote in the Urantia book that I will briefly adhere to. And basically what it says is that when success depends upon ignorance of the future. It will be disaster for us to know the future. So faith is something that we have to embrace wholeheartedly in order for it to be effective. Now there are some ways that you can sort of like tell whether you have faith or not, and that is that if you have a relationship with the Heavenly Father that you engage in through prayer and worship and service, then your faith tends to grow. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that your consciousness of that relationship grows. It grows as you continue to do this process. Now, it's often a question I've often had is that how do I know that what I believe is true? How do I know whether unicorns exist or not? And how do I know whether this relationship exists? Well, unicorns don't exist, and I've never seen a unicorn. But the same thing does not apply to faith. Faith exists because I know it exists because of what it does to my character and what it does to my motivation for living. So that as I exercise this faith, I have found that as time has gone by, that my character has indeed changed. The recognition of faith, peace, and joy. How do we recognize these values within our souls? Uh, the thing that I've come to understand as time has gone by is that the recognition of faith in our souls, in my soul, it leads to an increased relationship with the Father. That I find that I rely more and more upon Him in making decisions, and rely more and more on His guidance. That I am a faith son of God, and as I continue with that identity, I found that it has an effect on my spirituality, my attitudes, how I respond to life situations, and there's this peace, this stability that I have in my soul that no matter what is going on, I mean, emotionally, where I may be up and down, but beneath all of that is this comfort, this understanding that everything is proceeding as it should be, that all is well within my soul, that there's no despair in my soul, even though I have to go through some disagreeable experiences in my life, as we all have. But that leaves a certain amount of peace that's not dependent upon what goes on outside the world. It's a peace that passes all understanding. It's a peace that's a result of having a continuous and growing relationship with the Heavenly Father. And when you realize all of this, there's this joy in your soul that oftentimes can be connected to emotions. You can have an emotional reaction to joy, but most of the time it's almost perfect emotional control. But there's this sensation in your soul that you feel good because you have this Heavenly Father who's all powerful, all merciful, all loving, all kind, who has the last word about anything that happens to you. And He's absolutely reliable. He's absolutely moral. He's absolutely spiritual and merciful. And He loves me and He loves you as well. So that's how we recognize it, those values. Okay, can we go to the next slide? Now, along this journey, it's not always been a this has not always been a smooth journey. It's not always been a linear line. There have been periods in this journey where I've kind of done some things that were not compatible with growth. And I've listed a few of these things on the slide here. And I think we'll start with the one, this one, procrastination. I think we're all probably guilty of procrastination in one way or another sometime in our life. But it's basically saying that sometimes when you get these urges from the thought adjuster, these urges that cause you to do something or to say something, you tend to want to put it off and say, well, I'll do that later on, because sometimes you feel that if you do this, it may interfere with the life you're living. And so oftentimes you procrastinate on doing this and you say, I'll put this off to tomorrow, the next day. And of course, this leads to avoidance. You just kind of avoid the thing altogether and just put it out your mind and just have it go away. But the adjuster is persistent with these urges. And as long as you want to do the Father's will, these urges are going to stay in your mind until you make a decision about them. The other thing, we also fall into the trap of ease seeking. We hear these ads on television and in our society all the time about, ease seeking. Nobody wants to take challenges. Nobody wants to avoid challenges. Nobody wants to do anything that's hard and difficult. We just want to avoid all these hard things, but we know that does not lead to growth. Matter of fact, we are told that the greatest affliction in the cosmos for a mortal being is never to have been afflicted at all. And that's because these potentials only unravel as we struggle with them, as we try to overcome them, as we choose good over evil, as we continue to push forward with them. So these growth is inconsistent with ease seeking. And of course, we have the big daddy of them all, that is disagreeable experiences. We've all had those, and sometimes we just rather not deal with them at all, period. And of course, you're not going to go anywhere if you just stuck everything that comes in your life. One of the things that I came to realize is that the Father wants us to live this life. Whatever comes in this life, be it good, bad, or indifferent, the Father wants us to live this life. This is basically the struggle that Jesus had in the Garden of Eden, in the Garden of Gethsemane, was that when he went to talk to the Father about what was before him. And we know it was a very difficult challenge for the human Jesus, because he went through this as a human Jesus. And he sought to find an acceptable way to avoid this horrible death that awaited him. And he tried it 3 times, but he always ended each time. He said, not my will, but your will be done, Father. And he went back again, just went back again. And finally, he was really just, each time he went back, the divine nature was able to cover the human nature more and more, until finally on the last thing, the divine nature had conquered. And about this time, one of the angels came down and strengthened him and told him that the Father wanted him to go through this experience. And so that's our example, is that we're not to avoid painful experiences. The Father wants us to live these experiences. But what he does with us is that he does give us this abiding peace and this spiritual joy. And he gives us whatever we need to successfully overcome this experience. Now, when I say overcome this experience, I don't mean it's going to go away, but I mean you're going to triumph by choosing good over evil in it. You're going to choose truth over error. You're not going to be like Yogi Berra, who said that when you come to a fork in the road, take the fork. Now you're gonna make a choice. So this is what I've learned, that we have all kind of difficulties in our life, but the Father wants us to go through them with him. So it's in my experience, it's not been wise to try to pray to be taken out of an experience. In my experience, that doesn't happen. So we all take a lesson from that. Okay, next slide. Now, how does faith, peace, and joy relate to each other? We know all these qualities are one within the Father. They're unified. That from faith is your bedrock. From faith flows peace, and from peace flows joy. You think about that for a moment, you see it makes sense. You can't have any joy if you don't have any peace. You can't have any peace if you don't have faith. So they're all related to each other. In fact, they are one. They're one within the Father. They're one within you. And become unified as you reach supreme levels of, uh, of spiritual growth and worship. Okay, the next slide, Sherry. Unifying faith, peace, and joy. We just said that they become unified, and the process by which they become unified is our actual dedication and consecration to doing the Father's will. When we do that, our personalities become unified, all the values within us become unified, and we become as Jesus was. We're not absolute as he was, but become supremely unified. And that is how it happens. Okay. There's another slide, Sherry. Okay. And finally, in conclusion, I just want to say it's through experience we come to recognize and appreciate these values. And the appreciation and the dedication is how we come to experience the values. So therefore, we take heed by the quote that's repeated in the Urantia book many, many times. Be you therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. That concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, I'm here available. Thank you so much.
Any questions or comments for Dr. Perry?
Yes, please. So raise your virtual hand. Okay. So God Jameson, he raised his hand.
Dr. Perry, as always, wonderful. And for those of you that are just meeting Dr. Perry for the first time, I regard him as sort of a spiritual godfather to our community. So thank you for your participation. My question is, you yourself have experienced some of the difficulties of the faith journey. And I know you may be a little reluctant to share some of that, but I think part of our witness is actually sharing some of that experience. Can you say how some of those moments, what those were, and how you moved through those, and how faith was impactful in moving through those?
I think that the first experience that I had that was when my mother died at 14, age 14, and I had a alcoholic father there who decided he didn't want to be a father anymore. And it seemed like the members of the church kind of I won't say disown us, but I would say they just ignored us. And that had a lot to do with the difficulties that I was having. Though I do remember, now that you mentioned, I remember shortly thereafter, my mother had passed and the funeral was over with, and we was just in this limbo. I remember going into we had we call a pantry where they stored the groceries and stuff like that. I remember going in that pantry and asking God, please, Father, help me to become a man, because I need to become a man now. I remember I had forgotten that, but apparently the Father hadn't forgotten it because he was constantly, he was there all the time, even though I didn't realize it. And I think that as time went on, uh, I was not conscious that he was with me, but there was a critical crisis in my life when I made the decision to dedicate my life to doing the Father's will. And that was a climax of this psychic agitation in my mind, where I just was just overwhelmed by everything. I just had to admit that uh, I had failed. I had failed in life, even though I had become a physician, was doing pretty well materially, but I was really in a really bad bind morally and spiritually, and I almost lost my family, and it was horrible. But it was at that point that I really turned to God wholeheartedly. I had an aunt who who lived near me where I was staying at the time, and she told me, she said, James, she told me what love was like. She said, God is love. Said, if you take an egg, you see how brittle this egg is, and if you love someone, you're going to treat that person just like this egg is. As brittle as you're going to handle it with care, fragile, and make sure nothing happens to it. And that was the really realization that came to me to understand what true love really was. True love is really protecting and loving and caring for the person, and not exploiting and abusing them or discarding them. So that was the first reason. But I think the major thing that has happened to me in my life right now was that in August of 2017, uh, my wife and I were asleep in the bed, and about 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, I heard this shaking in the bed, just shaking, and she just really, really just shaking, 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 and all of a sudden, she fell off the bed. I said, oh my God, you fell off the bed. And I ran around the other side of the bed and tried to wake her up, and she wouldn't wake up. And I said, come on, wake up. I thought she was taking some prescription medicine with having side effects for it. I didn't realize at the time that she was having a stroke, and so I was said she had to go to the restroom, so I was able to get up on her feet, and because the stroke was still in evolution, she was able to stumble towards the bathroom, and on the way back she collapsed completely, and I was just in a fog, and I just couldn't comprehend that that's what was happening. But I did finally manage to get her into the in the bedroom, and this is a very important point. Another valuable lesson I learned also was I got her in the bed, waiting for the medicine to wear off, and I went outside to pray. I went outside, seeking the Father's will, and when I came back, I said, "Well, it's time." I said, "It's time to get up." It's time to get up, and she couldn't get up, and my daughter, who's a physician, happened to be home at that time, and I asked her to come and take a look at her mom. And of course, she recognized right away what was going on. She said, "I think she's having a stroke, Dad." So we called 911. But let me just regress a minute back to the point I was trying to make. I asked myself the question now. I went out to pray, to seek the Father's will. Why didn't the Father let me know that something was wrong, or something was amiss? He didn't. Matter of fact, that delay in my recognizing that she had a stroke is the reason why she's permanently disabled now, because she was too late for her to receive the clot busting medicine they usually give you when you have a stroke like that, and so she's basically paralyzed on the left side. She's got some strength in her left leg, but that's kind of weak. And it's been almost 4 years now, and she's still trying to recover. And the stroke has really affected her brain as well. But she's making progress with overcoming that as well. She's able to read now instead of the Urantia book again, and it's really making progress, good progress there. But this was a devastating thing that happened to me, and I couldn't wrap my mind around it. Uh, I still continued to pray, seek the Father's will, and finally came to understanding that that this is your show, James. You're living this life. I'm not going to tell you what to do. You have to make that decision for yourself. And so I came to understand what I just shared previously, that the Father wants us to live this life, to make decisions of our own, and that's how we learn, how we grow. So that at that point, I finally got out of rehabilitation and got her back home. And I decided at that point to dedicate the rest of my life to taking care of my wife, to try to treat her the way Jesus would if he were present. And people tell me that I'm doing that, but of course you can't really judge yourself very well. But it's my decision to take care of her and not allow someone who doesn't love her, as Jesus said, money can't love. It's good that I have these skills that I can take care of her. Other people probably don't have the skills to do what I'm doing, but that was my decision that I've been remaining loyal to. And of course, I've been criticized by that by various non-spiritual people who says you need to look out for yourself. 2 months later, after the stroke, I had a massive heart attack, uh, and I woke up in the morning. I woke up about I don't know why these things happen in the morning like that. It was about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I woke up and was having this pain over the left side of my chest. I thought it was from pushing the wheelchair at the rehab center, but it never did. It wouldn't go away. It wouldn't go. It just got worse and worse and worse. And finally, I was saying, well, maybe if I go to the emergency room, I can get this thing ruled out and be back at the nursing home before she really gets up in the morning. That's what I was thinking. And so I called 911, and they took me to the hospital, and the doctor, he says, I'm afraid you've had a heart attack. And so I called my wife, called my daughter, and told them I had a heart attack. And I say this was just too much. It's just too much at the same time. But I was really concerned, and so they finally flew me to to University of Carolina, where they did it, where they put 2 stents in my clogged up artery. And I've been doing fairly well since that time. And but as you can begin to see that it's a very difficult situation physically, because now I'm handicapped myself, but I'm dedicated and determined to take care of my wife as long as I'm physically able to. That emotional discomfort is not a reason to stop doing this, or because I'd rather be doing something else is not a reason to stop doing this. I'm completely dedicated and consecrated to doing my Father's will, and nothing's going to change that, not anything on this earth or anywhere else. That's my story, folks.
Thank you,
Dr.
Perry.
Perry, I have a question. You said that when you sought to pray to seek the Father's will the night that Marion fell out of the bed, you said that the Father wanted you to make a choice, make a decision. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Let me put it this way: it's not so much that he wanted me to make a decision, but what he wanted me to do was to deal with this. This is a reality. This is a reality that you have to deal with. You have to use your own judgment, your own wisdom to deal with these kind of problems. This is a material problem. But the thing I neglected to say was that something did happen when I went out to pray. And that something was I became more and more like Jesus as a result of that. So that's what happens when we pray. When we pray to the Father and seek to do his will, we become more and more like him. That's not often appreciated because we're material beings and we tend to focus on the material moment. But that's what really happened, is that that you become more and more like God. Let me share something else with you, a part of this journey, that a part of this process that I'm still going through. Because my daughter lives in Washington, D.C., and my other daughter lives in South Carolina, and because my wife cannot get out the wheelchair or get out the bed by herself, it creates quite a bit of dilemma when I have to go out and leave her by herself. Because my mind says that, well, what happens if she needs you? Or what happens if something happens, you're not there, and there's nobody there that I can call on to help me. So that's been a recurring theme in my mind, a struggle in my mind to struggle with that. And again, my wife even told me, said, James, you've done all that you can do. There's nothing else you can do, and I accept that intellectually. Emotionally, I'm struggling with it because I say, well, there's nobody here to help her if something should happen to me. But the Father says, this is you have to go through with this. This is your experience, and you have to make the best decision that you can make. I have to go out. There's no doubt about it. I have to go out and do things. I have to go out and get prescriptions filled. I have to go out and get medicine. I have to go out and get supplies. There's no way around it. I have to go out, and I have to live with that anxiety. But the final word is that you have to look beyond this life. We're all gonna pass one way or the other. Some will pass in their sleep. Some will pass accidentally. Some will pass from disease. But this is the way life is. But it's how you respond to the situation that matters. It's not what happens to you, but it's how you respond to it.
Thank you, Dr. P. Anyone else?
You're welcome.
Get them now while you can.
Well, there was some chat messages. So
I believe that Pio Park has his not virtual hand, his actual hand raised.
okay.
Pio, you have a question?
Dr. Perry, thank you for your sharing us your personal hardship. But going back with your difficult young life, being abandoned by your father after your mom died, how did you fare thinking back from that young age alone and making it through medical school? What do you think drove you to a career that is a respectful career? Namely, how did you get through those medical school hell of the first 2 years of medical school? what do you think drove you to that? And when did you find that? I'm sure you were not a reader then, but what drove you through that hard choices?
Well,
You did not take the fork, you took the hard road. So can you share with us
yeah,
that experience?
yeah. I can tell you the whole story about 10 minutes. We got 10 minutes. I can tell you the whole story.
Yes, you have 10 minutes more. Yeah.
Okay, great. You know, I alluded to the fact that he was there all the time. I was able in my senior year. I had made a decision to quit high school altogether because I became so discouraged. Uh, but my aunt, who had been living with us, you know, told me not to do that. I was going to quit because I didn't have anything to wear. I didn't have a suit to wear, and she said, "Well, I'll take you down to this store." Of course, it was one of those stores where they charge you high interest rates. But she got me a suit to graduate in, and so I graduated from high school. Uh, at that point, it became a question about what I was going to do to make a living. And so I decided to join the army. So I joined the army during this is from 62 to 68. I joined the army, which seemed to have solved my economic problems for the time being. But after about 3 years in the army, something inside of me began to rebel about being in the army. This was a real bad conflict for me because the economic reason I went into the army still existed. Inside of me was rebelling against me staying in the army, and I just couldn't shake it. I tried to stay in there, but it got worse and worse and worse. And so finally, I told my wife, I can't do this anymore. I have to get out of the army. I have to get out of the army because I can't do this anymore. So after agonizing about, I guess I agonized about a year or so. I would start out in the morning saying I'm going to get out the army, and by the time I got back to work, I was saying I'm going to stay in. And this went several times all day long, every day. I went through this struggle, but eventually I made a decision that it went something like this: I don't care if I have to sell pencils on the street. I'm getting out of this place. And at that point, I got out of the place. And at that time, the government had passed a GI Bill for veterans. And so it paid for tuition and a stipend to live on. So I got out and got the paperwork and stuff, got that rolling. But I was a little bit late trying to enroll in college because the registration period already passed. But I went to talk to the dean of students, and I told him, I said, look, I feel like if I don't do this now, I'm never going to do it. So he told me, he said, well, if you can find classes that will let you in, I'll go ahead and prove it. And so I did. Believe it or not, I was studying industrial education at that time. And during that period of time, I was having a lot of trouble with my eyes, reading with intense reading and stuff. And so I looked in the phone book and got this doctor's name. He's an ophthalmologist. And I went to see him. And in the course of his conversation with me, he asked me if I was so-and-so's son. He had operated on my father's cataracts. And he realized I was his son. He asked me about what are you doing now? I said, well, I'm in college now. I'm trying to, become a teacher so I can take care of my family. So he asked me, well, what kind of grades did you make? Are you making in school? I said, well, I'm doing pretty well. I'm making A's. He said, why don't you become a doctor? I said, what? Why don't you become a doctor? I said, how am I going to become a doctor? I don't know anybody who's successful. I don't know anybody who's gone to college before. I was living in the project. I didn't know anything about how to be successful, how to even start. And he said, well, this is what I want you to do. He says, I want you to stop the industrial education and start taking pre-med courses. So I went home and told my wife about it. I said, this doctor told me I should become a doctor. And she said, no, you got to get a job and go to work. So it took me, couple months to convince her that I really could become a doctor. So what I did was I took his advice. I took the pre-med course. I didn't have to have a whole curriculum in that, but just certain courses that require you to enter medical school, primarily organic chemistry, physics, foreign language, some science, and you have to impress them that interview that you really would make a good doctor. So I took the courses, took the medical aptitude test, passed the test, and got accepted to medical school. And of course, when I went there, that first year, uh, got that first year was horrible. It was terrible. But one thing I had learned from the military was discipline. I knew that I had the discipline to do this, and I stayed with it. And after the first 2 years after that it was I won't say it's a piece of cake, but it was really quite yeah doable. And I found out I had an aptitude with patients, that I could talk to them, relate to them, and you know, comfort them. And so I went through the process, and I kind of graduated from medical school. And so that what happened was that every step of the way, every crisis, there was somebody to help me. And of course, I didn't realize all this till I had converted back to seeking God. I realized that He's the one that put all these people in place and all these circumstances in place that allowed me to do this. And so that one of the criteria that I received a public health service scholarship that required me to go work in a rural area for a certain amount of time. I think it was for 3 years. Yeah, 3 years of service in a rural underserved area. And I went to that area and.
Hey, Doc, thank you so much. There was a guardian angel with you all the time. What was your MOS in the Army?
Antonio, do you think we should just have a transition now? I think we probably have gotten as
Okay.
far as.
Is there maybe something that you can add that he could not explain himself, just to wrap it up?
Well, I don't remember what his MOS was, but I can tell you that he's been a leader of our group since I was 18, and I'm not 18 anymore. And every time we study the book and there's a problem or an issue, that comes up for all of us, at the end of the day, the answer is always seek the Father's will. And I was very resistant to that as a young person, as a teenager and a young adult. I would go to this group of adults and who had been reading this book and studying, and I would ask Dr. Perry for guidance and direction and to help me understand certain life events that I was experiencing. And I was very materialistic in how I saw the Father, and so faith was based on material reality, right? And peace and joy were based on material external functions in my life, as opposed to what was happening on the inside. What I recognize now is that it is indeed a journey. And the Father needs time to transform our spirits, right? And to transform our moral characters into what He wants us to be. And that requires a great deal of patience and persistence, doggedness and seeking, to know the right way. Basically it's learning how to live, right? Learning how to live and how to, especially as a person of color in this country, what Dr. Perry experienced and what many people experience really takes a toll on your moral and ethical development. It takes a toll on your confidence, on how you see yourself in context to the larger dominant society. And so for us, it's like a double lesson plan. You know, so what you all may have to learn, well, we have to learn it too, but then we have to remove all of the barriers in our psyches and in our souls that have been put there from, you know, hardship and trauma and those kinds of things. So, you know, when Dr. Perry talks about, you know, coming from a very impoverished background where, you know, no one went to school, no one finished school, no one had, you know, a career. He wasn't taught the things that most people are, or that a lot of people are taught. You know, he didn't have that upbringing. And so to get from there to here, where his only desire, I think, from knowing him for over 40 years is to do the Father's will, is nothing short of spectacular. And it leads me to remember the last quote, one of the last quotes in the book about, you know, the definition of success. Some people's lives are, what's the quote? Some people's lives are
too noble to be merely
more
successful.
noble. Yes. Could you say the whole quote, Andre? Do you remember it?
I'll look it up to get it exactly.
Yeah. So that quote about, you know, what truly is a successful life is one that's noble. I see that in Dr. Perry and Marion and how they have, they've shared with me all of their challenges. I've seen them, I've heard them, and, you know, it's no mere intellectual exercise. You know, these teachings he longs to grab hold of and allow the Spirit to transform him. And because I admire what I've seen happen in his life, you know, I long for the same. And so I'm very grateful to the Father to have had the experience of learning and growing with Dr. Perry and his study group. And so I'm glad that he could come and share with you all today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sherry. Thank you. Thank you very much. And say goodbye to Dr. Perry on behalf of all of us.
And the
I will,
quote,
thank you.
The quote is, "Some men's lives are too great and noble to descend to the low levels of being merely successful."
Yep. Thank you, Chris.